So, guys, did we really think Nolan was going to make a bad movie? Seriously? So, The Odyssey is finally here. Christopher Nolan's long anticipated adaptation of the classic story. In it, we have Matt Damon stepping into the titular role of Odysseus, the man who spent 10 years at war and another 10 years trying to get home while facing all types of gods and monsters along the way. Now, this is a story I've experienced in multiple ways. We have the TV movie, which is decades old now. We have the literary adaptations. The one I read was by Robert Fitzgerald, which I think is the most consistently referenced one, which also inspired this version, the graphic novel version by Gareth Hines, which is a great way to experience the story if you never have. And of course, recently we have Epic the Musical, which, if you know, you know. Now, seeing how as this story is so classic, I am going to reference the original literature while doing this review. So there are going to be like a few plot points that I talk about. I'm not going to reveal any like major resolutions or spoilers or anything like that. But just know if you don't want to know absolutely anything, just be warned. I am going to talk about it a little bit. And I'm also going to say up front, I absolutely adored this movie. I loved it, and the glaze is coming. Call up Dunkin' Donuts and Krispy Kreme. The glaze is about to be super real. Like, the biggest compliment I can give this film is that after having watched a 3 hour cut of it in 70 millimeter, I immediately thought I now need to see this in IMAX. I need another 3 hours of this in IMAX, like the real IMAX, like we have out here in DC. The Smithsonian Museum has an actual IMAX screen. Sorry. So this movie was epic, epic like the epic cycle. Yes, it was epic in scale and scope, and it was just worth every single penny of its budget. I loved it. This was a masterpiece in filmmaking. Well, let me take that back just a little bit. Other movies that came out this year, like Obsession or Project Hail Mary, I believe had more of a streamlined story. So the storytelling aspect was, a tiny bit stronger in those two films. But as far as the art of putting film to screen, visual representation that an audience can enjoy, I don't think a movie has done it this well this year, last year, honestly, going back to probably Everything Everywhere All at Once. This is a movie that should like be studied in film school. But it does have its issues, which I'm going to get into. Which actually before that does lead me to something I want to say. I have actual critiques about this movie. But the other day I posted a quick short with my immediate out of theater reaction where I just smiled at the camera. And I was hit with DMs and comments about, how much was I getting paid to like this movie? Which is a little odd because why would Universal care about my channel with 4,000 subscribers? But it wasn't just me. I know people who have like, 200, 150 followers that were hit with the same comments. So a lot of weirdos are coming out for this movie. And I just need to say, like, if you're someone who hates this movie, you've hated the idea of it because you think Nolan's a sellout based on the adaptation he chose, or you think that the costumes are weird, or you think that they should have been speaking British instead of American English, which wouldn't have been quote unquote accurate either. Or you're upset that Lupita Nyong'o and Elliot Page have a combined time of maybe 6 minutes in this 3 hour film. Yeah, you might as well just leave. I really have nothing for you here. Nothing I say is going to change your mind about it, and none of my critiques are going to agree with you at all. So, I would love the views, but I don't want to waste either of our time. So, you should just, get out. Now, if you stuck around, let's talk about it and let's get into what I did not like first. Now, like the literature, this movie dropped us like in the middle of things, like things are happening. And while I do think it does a solid job catching you up, I do believe that it would behoove you to watch maybe a 2 or 3 minute recap, at least on the Trojan War, so you understand the settings and the characters that are in this story. because in the first 30, 45 minutes you are hit with a lot of information that's setting up the rest of the movie, which a lot of movies do. That's kind of what act 1 in a movie is for, but this is a 3-hour movie, so it takes a little bit longer, because during this time you're going to get hit with locations like Ithaca and Sparta and Pythos, and names like Menelaus, Agamemnon, Nestor, Ajax. And again, while the movie I think does a really solid job at making sure that you know who all the important players are, I think having that knowledge basis will really add to the experience for you. Now, since we are dropped in on the middle of things, we are following like kind of multiple storylines at the same time. And I will say, even me, it took me like a minute just to get used to the way the story was being told in like the first 2 acts, right? Because we have Odysseus, who is on an island with the goddess Calypso. He's, an older Odysseus, and he is retelling his life story. This is actually what happened in the book. He was telling it to a king, all the adventures he went on, where he encountered the Cyclops and Scylla and Charybdis and all the gods and monsters he faced after the Trojan War trying to get home. In this adaptation, he's telling this story to the goddess Calypso, whose island he happened to wash up on, right? And he's telling her this story in an attempt to remember his life, because he's dealing with like some amnesia because of all the trauma he went through. He essentially like forcibly blocked his memory. And she's like, okay, you need to now remember who you are so that you can go home and finish your journey, which is why he begins retelling the story of everything that happened after the Trojan War to how he ended up on her island. So with him, we kind of get, the present day with him and Calypso, plus his retelling of the stories, which, are essentially flashbacks. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Ithaca, what he is the king of, we have his now adult son, played by Tom Holland, dealing with 108 suitors, led by Robert Pattinson's character, Antinous. And these suitors are all trying to win the hand of Penelope, the queen of Ithaca, Odysseus, his wife, who is patiently waiting for her husband, but the patience of the kingdom has run out. They're like, no, you need to remarry, pick a new king so that we can move on. So Penelope and Telemachus are also dealing with them, while Penelope sometimes has flashbacks of Odysseus to before he left for the Trojan War. So, we get her perspective on the past and her perspective in the present as well. And then, Telemachus is determined to find proof that his father is still alive so that, he can handle these suitors. So there are, I guess, multiple points of view that we're going to follow throughout this film. And in a lesser filmmaker's hands, that would be a problem, but here it really isn't. And I know this is supposed to be my sour. So all of this is to say that following these multiple perspectives during the first act does lead to a lot of information being thrown at you. And it's not as, I guess, quick or fast paced or action heavy as the rest of the movie. Doesn't really bother me, but I do just want to throw that out there for general audiences. Now, something else I actually didn't like, which sounds odd for a 3-hour movie, is I felt it should have been longer. There were certain points in this movie where the story was cut short, and I understand it had to be done because you need a movie that a person can actually sit through. And if he told the entire story, it might be 5 or 6 hours long, right? But there are certain parts of the story where I felt like more time should have been devoted to those portions. For example, we get an excellent, excellent scene with the Cyclops, which you might have seen in the trailers, when they're trapped in a cave with this monster, which honestly gave like horror movie vibes. It was so well shot, so well acted, so well done. And that scene is given the time it needs to develop. Juxtapose that to the portion of the story where they run into Circe, who was like a witch goddess and kind of like a frenemy in the original literature. She's a major part of the story, but in this, they kind of speed run through it. They get to her island, they meet her, what happens, and then they're on to the next challenge. Similar to, they encounter the giants, they go to the land of the giants here. And I don't think the movie even explains how they got there, why they are there, what the hostilities are about. They kind of just pull up on this island, the giants come out, and excellent battle scene ensues. But then, then they're off to the next danger. So I kind of felt like specifically those two, like I wish more time was devoted to flesh that out. And there are some portions that are, completely left out, like when they encountered a floating island in the sky. But, all of this stuff, it's not really a deal breaker for the movie. It's more of I guess, missed opportunity. And I guess I am saying I am really looking forward to the 5 hour director's cut of this film, if it exists. Now, the last thing that I'm less forgiving on is the changes that Christopher Nolan made. I wasn't a fan of all of them. Specifically in my head, everything that has to do with Calypso, played by Charlize Theron. Remember, I mentioned that Odysseus is telling her his story in an attempt to, get past this self-induced amnesia that he gave himself, like this mental block to block out all the trauma of the war and trying to get home. And in this capacity, Calypso seems more like, someone who found him, nursed him, developed feelings for him, but decided that he needed to remember his past to get past it and get home to the wife and child that he left. Right. So she's essentially trying to help him get past his mental issue. In the original literature, Calypso is obsessed with this man, so much so that she essentially holds him prisoner and keeps him young so that they can spend eternity together, and only lets him go because Zeus himself commands it. I would have loved to see that portrayal on screen, because I think Charlize Theron would have done a great job portraying the character in that way. Oh, and then Nolan adds this thing. There are these people called the Sea People that all of ancient Greece is worried about. You keep hearing stories about them and how they're coming and how armies need to be raised in order to protect themselves. Like Sparta is raising an army to protect itself from the Sea People. In Ithaca, they need a king in order to raise an army to protect itself from the Sea People. And when I first heard it, I was like, oh, okay, that's an interesting, throw in here. But then moments later, I kind of guessed and figured out who these Sea People were. And with the ultimate reveal of them, it turns out that I was right. And it was kind of a letdown, honestly. And I'm also not a fan of the ending. This is 100% a Sam nitpick. The movie's ending is incredibly satisfying. I just really prefer the ending in the original source material. That's it. Now let's get to what I liked. I could spend the next hour talking about everything I loved in this movie because there's a lot. I'm really gonna try to limit myself, man. And there's gonna be stuff I miss, I know, and I'm going to be upset about, but we'll get through this. First off, the production value. Lord have mercy. You see every bit of budget in this movie. Somehow, just like with Oppenheimer, there is very little CG in this movie, and I don't know how they did it. But everything looks so real. All of, obviously, the practical effects with, the boats and the water and the swordplay and all that, that's all fine and dandy. But even the more supernatural elements, Scylla, Charybdis, the Cyclops, Lord have mercy. That Cyclops looked like it was a thing that exists in the real world that would give me nightmares. Again, that entire sequence when they run into the Cyclops, it was traumatizing, like it belongs in a horror movie. And then on top of that, all the battle scenes, even though this is a film that takes place in the ancient Greek world, it just goes to show you war is always horrible. Like the deaths in this movie, some of them are just they're kind of disturbing, especially the sack of Troy, which I'm going to get to a little bit later. But man, oh man, the battles are epic. Shout out to the DP and the choreographer, because it's not just the swordplay that's great. You see everything in great detail. It's so good. The investment in the IMAX cameras, I think, was well worth it here. Hey there, sorry to interrupt. I recorded this late night, and I totally forgot to mention something about this battle scene that is very important, and that is the soundtrack that goes with it. I specifically need to call out Ludwig Göransson and the work he did here. Now, we know he's great with all the awards he's won, and he just continues to be great in this movie. Every single piece of background music, whether it's a moment of calm, a moment of tension, or an epic battle, it is fueled not only by the visuals and the choreography, of course, but also by a very important part of the production, which is the music. As it specifically relates to the battles, when they're about to go down, the music constantly builds, and you don't even realize the type of anxiety it's putting inside of you, man. But it's so good, so well executed. So I just wanted to make sure that I shouted that out here. All right, back to the review. Something else I liked in this movie, I liked that even though it's very clearly a land of gods and monsters, the gods themselves aren't as prevalent as they are in the original literature. Like they aren't physical manifestations that directly intervene, right? Like Odysseus has this whole thing where he's determined to like defy the fate that the gods have set for him and his men. And he even has this whole spiel where he's like, you know, you guys never really reveal yourselves to us. Why should we leave our hands in your fate? And then, you know, the vision of Athena that he sees, played by Zendaya, she has this great comeback about, you know, hey, who do you think makes the waves move? Who do you think makes the wind blow? Like we are in everyday life. We're always around you. And I love that because, you know, it leaves a bit of intrigue in everything, right? Like we know if you've read the source material that Poseidon is pissed at Odysseus for the encounter with the Cyclops, right? And that's why his men are always like never getting close to home and always drifting away because, you know, they're on the sea and he controls the sea. But you know, there's not a person who plays Poseidon that comes down. The waves just act a certain way. You know, when they upset Zeus, he doesn't come down and throw a lightning bolt at them. You know, you just see the skies darken above their heads and they know that they've done something wrong. And I really like that portrayal of the gods in this way, you know, where they're not like actual people coming down and like moving their arms and controlling things. Like they're actual just like manifestations taking shape in this real world. I haven't talked about the acting yet. The acting, surprise, surprise, great all across the board. Anyone who thought this movie was going to suck because of the way Nolan decided to tell it, I think you owe him a written letter of apology. Every member of this cast was excellent. Every single one of them showed up to work and did their job. Anne Hathaway, she might win an award for the work she put into this movie. I felt her pain as a queen who was longing for her husband to return and growing ever so impatient with all these people in her house. Yes, John Bernthal does use the same voice he does as in The Punisher, you know, where it's almost like he's growling when he speaks. But it works for this portrayal of Menelaus. Both Zendaya and Charlize Theron as these goddesses who are involved in Odysseus's life. They have their own type of relationship with him, and I thought that was portrayed very well by them. Elliot Page, for all the crap that he got, gave a brilliant dialogue in the Hades section of this film. And no, he does not play the character the internet told you that he plays. And I want to give Lupita flowers because, I mean, she did do a great job. But just as I thought when this news came out, she honestly wasn't even on screen long enough for her to do something like truly, truly impactful. So, I mean, she is obviously fine. She's a great actor, but in this story, just like in the source material, she didn't even have enough to do. So there's no reason for all the hatred, in my opinion. John Leguizamo has a supporting role as a farmhand and old friend of Odysseus, and I thought he was really good, both as a mentor to the young Telemachus and as kind of like a harbinger to these suitors, warning them what was going to happen when the king returned home. And speaking of suitors, I do want to shout them out, specifically Corey Hawkins and Robert Pattinson, who kind of lead them. They make themselves very easy to hate, but at the same time do a good job showing the sentiments of like basically everyone in the kingdom who's just done waiting after 20 years for this king. But I mean, the star of this movie, Matt Damon, oh my gosh, it's the best thing I've seen him in years. The dude makes Odysseus the most easy hero to root for. He is honorable, admirable, generally just cares for the lives of everyone. The Trojan horse, it was his idea to do it, and that haunts him. Even though he knows it needed to be done, the idea that he tricked these people to letting him into their home, he was feeling empathy for everyone in the city. And there's a great reveal during the sack of Troy that I'm not going to give away here. But when it happened, like I felt it in my heart. I was like, okay, that is really cool. Speaking of the sack of Troy, oh my goodness. Yo, it was a bloody and horrific affair and so awesome to watch on screen. When Odysseus is walking through the city as it's burning and its citizens are screaming, and he's just like has so much, and he just falls down and collapses. Yo, I felt that so much. But yeah, he's someone who's easy to root for, like emotionally, but also when he comes home, the homecoming, which is the third act, he is someone you root for because you want him to destroy everything. And that leads me to the best part of this movie. Yo, The third act of this film, The Homecoming, when Odysseus arrives, just like in the trailer, he is bringing vengeance,
bringing it all.
And all he does. Yo, the planning and preparation that he goes through when he comes home and finds his kingdom in shambles and in the hands of these suitors. It's just like it's so well done that by the time everything's about to go down, you are just chomping at the bit. And oh my gosh, does it pay off? So Odysseus, very early on, it's shown that he does this thing when he's hunting, right? Hunting game or fighting someone, where he takes his bow and he strums it, right? He strums it to let the person or the animal know that, hey, I'm here, so that it's a fair fight and he's not sneaking up on them. Dog. When he strums that bow for the final time, just trust me, you're gonna be smiling from ear to ear. He was the Batman in that moment, which is a bit ironic because Robert Pattinson was sitting there, and I remember thinking to myself, literally, I was like, yo, Batman is getting Batmaned right now. So good. Something else I need to mention. Well, there's a lot I want to mention, but last thing I'm going to mention here, going back to the practical effects, there is a part in this movie where, men are turned into pigs. You know what I'm talking about if you've read the story. And that scene, when the men are being turned into pigs, I don't think I've ever seen a scene that both disturbed and impressed me as much, because these men are essentially morphed into pigs. Like their bodies are like physically like twisted into the form of a pig, which is gross, but visually I'm just like, I don't even know how they did it. It looked incredible. Again, practical effects. That I think that is the biggest display of how well done it was. But yeah, man, I have been rapping so much. This movie lives up to all the hype. Does it take a minute to get going? Yes, but it's an important minute with exposition that you will need. The action was great. The acting was great. Matt Damon was easy to root for, and Anne Hathaway is going to be in consideration for award season. We spend a lot of time with Tom Holland's Telemachus, who himself is also easy to root for. And you honestly are wishing the best for him as he's on this hunt to find the father that he barely knows. So yes, I am squarely in the camp of people who are going to like this movie. I think it is a masterpiece in filmmaking, even if the storytelling isn't really Nolan's best. But 4.5 out of 5. You should go see it. All right, this was a longer one, but let me know what you think. Let me know any parts I missed that you really liked. And until next time, I'm out.